Okie dokie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Infrastructure Task Force Advisory Committee, Monday, April 3rd. Can we take the roll call, please?
Mr. Angeli, Mr. Grabsky, Mr. Lebris,
Present.
Mr. Marshall, Mr. Partington.
Here.
Mr. Walters,
Here.
Mr. Zellman,
Here.
Mr. Landers.
Here.
Chairman Leon.
Here.
Mr. Grabsky just showed up.
Mr. Grabsky just showed up. So let's ease. Okay, so we now move on to the approval of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Everybody in favor of the agenda, just say aye.
Aye.
Done? Okay, we have 3 sets of minutes that need to be approved. The February 1 special meeting, February 6th regular, and March 6th regular. Let's start with the February 1 special meeting. Do I have any comments? Hearing no comments on that. Oh, wait a minute.
Second.
Approved and second. Everybody in favor of approving that, please say aye.
Aye.
That's done. Okay, February 6th, regular meeting. Do I see any comments on February 6th, regular meeting? Hearing none. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay. And March 6th, last but not least, any comments on March 6th?
Comments.
Comments, yes, sir.
Page number.
Page number, please.
Page 14 of the minutes. March 6th.
Yes, sir, what would you like?
The 5th paragraph down, we talk about the chair observed that while the committee may wish to be helpful to residents who may contact them, a direct response may not be the best tactic. She felt the more appropriate response in this case. So I'm not challenging or wanting to change exactly what minutes say, but my concern is that we didn't really set up a procedure or decide on a procedure of how to handle this if it should occur in the future. You recall Ralph responded to the letter that we got,
Right.
and then he said, let's discuss how to handle those, and then you said basically what it says here, that you think that it shouldn't be an individual, it should be the group. But I don't think we really formalized what the procedure should be in the case if that happens.
So then perhaps we can discuss that under old business, because we obviously can't change the minutes.
Right.
Because that's exactly what I said.
Okay,
So let's discuss it under
okay,
that.
thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, sir.
Then you need to go, if you're gonna add it as an old business, you need to go back and add it on the agenda as an item.
We can't just discuss it among ourselves under open discussion?
To bring it up under committee, under
Under
member
Comments, member comments.
maybe.
Yeah, then let's not make it old business, just make it open discussion.
Open discussion,
Yes.
much better. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thanks, Rose.
Any other comments on the March 6 minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was marvelous.
Very good meetings.
We're getting better and the minutes taker is getting better.
No, they're always good.
Yeah. Okay, next item on the agenda. Okay, old business, update on the city water distribution mapping. Why is it in this order? Shouldn't we be doing? Okay, we'll do old business first, no problem. Update on the city's water distribution mapping. Okay, who's doing that?
I can do that.
Okay, Chris.
So it's a pretty short update. Basically, mobile LiDAR throughout the entire city is probably 80-90% done. They're flying aerial photography as well as LiDAR here in the next week or two. While all this data is coming in, the Prime is QCing all the work, obviously. The LiDAR imagery will be coming to us in the next week or two as an actual deliverable. So we'll actually be able to start using that data for whatever we need. But long story short, they're on schedule to be done well before the DEP deadline of December 2024. So it's running smoothly. They haven't really had any issues. Some of the gated neighborhoods, they've been asked why they're there, but we've provided them some letters on city letterhead explaining it, and so far so good. The HOAs have let them in when they need to.
Well, I've sent around a notice to my civic association because everybody started telling me, what's the markings on the street?
Yeah.
Are they gonna open up the street again? I said, no.
Yeah, we do receive calls or emails about that every once in a blue moon, and it's questions exactly like that, so we field those as they come, but we've done, a handful of outreach efforts, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or the city's webpage or some various other methods, but for the most part, the questions have been few and far between.
All right, questions? Not few and far between.
Yeah, I just wanna say, Madam Chair, that I guess they thought I was going to be down here talking about this. So for a week now, they've been in front of my house doing one thing or another. Even when they're working on the street behind me, they park in front of my house. I said, okay, guys, I'm not gonna say a word. Go and dig and trench and everything else. But I was pleased to see how the, what do you call it, directional digging or whatever it's called.
Yep, directional drilling.
That is amazing.
It is amazing.
That is because I've been trying to figure out how that thing happened. It's amazing.
Yep, we actually just did a drainage pipe that we had to do an outfall rehab in between two homes that were significantly overbuilt on top of the old pipe. So rather than open excavating basically their entire backyard and destroying everything, we just directionally drilled a new pipe right next to the old one and grout filled the old pipe. So it comes in handy.
Nice.
You should have watched them when they did the 54-inch pipe.
I know, I was
Oh,
telling my
it
wife,
was
I was telling my
amazing.
wife that.
Yeah, there's video of it too. You can just watch it on YouTube. Yes, Peter.
So this mapping, how will that integrate with or replace maybe our existing records? How is this going to be used and built into our records that are used when responding to the Sunshine One call type things?
So for the most part, this is really more of a mapping for asset management purposes. Specifically, DEP put this on us so that way we would actually map the system to know where our pipes and valves are for emergency shut-off purposes. Also used to update our models to make sure we have all of our infrastructure properly in our models. But as far as like our atlases or as-built drawing records, in a roundabout way, this will add to that. It's not going to replace any of that because these won't be actually certified as-builts. They'll be survey level accuracy for valves and generally for the pipes 8 inches and up for where they're located. So it's going to supplement what we currently have. They're taking the existing GIS database. They're taking the as-built drawings, which we have thousands of. They're using all of that as their data to kind of start as a base map. And then they're taking all their new survey information, aerial, subsurface utility locates, all the various other methods that they're using, including ground penetrating radar, and they're basically updating what exists. So where there's something close to where we already have a record for, they'll verify which one's right and they'll get rid of the old one. And when there's something brand new in their map versus our map, they will verify whether or not they missed something or it's truly something new. So basically, long story short, is they're going to update what we have in our GIS databases, which will be provided to developers or various contractors that come requesting as-built or atlas information.
And who's they that's going to do this? The consultant or the city staff?
The consulting group that we're hiring, they're working directly with our GIS folks in IT. So we're all working hand in hand to make sure whatever data handoffs that we do with back and forth with each other is done. So that way we're kind of doing double QA/QC on it. Whatever they give us, we also verify how it replaces what's in our system. And we're doing it by sections throughout the city. So as we go do a certain quadrant in the city, we actually lock that portion of the GIS maps so nobody can edit them. GIS team here takes the data from the consulting team and imports it in, and they do a check just to see what's changed. And then they can verify with the consulting team if they've found the same things themselves that are different from the old versus the new, just to double check to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Just as long as the guys that go out and paint the road have access to the latest stuff, basically, and they will, right?
Yep. Yeah, so it's going to be not only our GIS maps that we currently have will be completely based off of the new mapping project, but also as we continue to build out our CityWorks program and software for asset management purposes, those GIS drawings feed the background of that system too. So everybody's gonna have access to these new maps.
Just for curiosity's sake, what did this cost, this contract?
Roughly 8 million.
And that was part of the consent order, and that was part of the first $200 million that we borrowed? Or did we pay for it out of regular funds?
I can't answer exactly where the funding for this specific project came from, if it came from the bond funds or the general budget, but I believe it came from the bond
I
funds.
think so too, as I recall. That was a good bond.
But
A
somebody know
lot
the
done on
answer,
it,
right?
Was that?
But somebody know the answer.
I can find the answer very easily, yes.
Okay.
We do know where it came from, I just don't at this moment.
Roosevelt is tracing the money.
Yes, right.
Yes, he is.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Okay, so now we need an update on the comprehensive funding for sidewalks and streets. Let me just give a little background on this. At our last meeting, we were getting a lot of information about the sidewalks and the streets and the money and where's the money coming from and is there enough money? And we asked the staff, kind of try and pull it all together and put it down on paper. So it's, it's not she said and then we talk about it and we forget about it. So I asked them to put it down on paper and here it is on paper. And so who's gonna go through this? Is this Karen's? Or
Yeah, I
Jill?
think-
Jill?
I'll start with the, this is like, we're all going to explain our part. So I'll start with the City of Fort Lauderdale Public Works, the general fund and gas tax. And then we will turn it over to Karen on the, after I do my 2 slides.
Okay,
And then we have Matt here from Risk Division to answer any of your questions on that exhibit that was attached.
we're doing sidewalks first.
We're doing sidewalks first.
Okay,
So at the top, you see that we identified, Public Works has a general fund balance that for this year of $1.5 million. And below that, Risk Division, they have their own separate exhibit.
okay,
And in the next line, you'll see that, Karen will go into more detail, but there is no money per se in this year's budget for new sidewalks that TAM has allotted.
right?
But they do have a sidewalk master plan assessment. It's like a one-time only expense is of $180,000. I'll let Karen go into that.
Okay, and we're talking FY '23 here now.
Current,
Okay,
this is all current dollars.
okay,
And then we also put something that can be filled in at a later date, but I'm not the expert on the Broward County MPO
Okay.
or the FDOT monies. But at the bottom, we have Broward County surtax monies. There is a pending application for that amount there for $1.25 million.
pending but no money.
No money in hand right now, pending, yes.
Okay, so,
And if we could wait for all the sidewalk questions afterwards, so we don't know who's gonna answer any of your questions. So can we go through this next slide?
sure, okay.
Yeah.
We'll
And then,
save our
and then
questions.
Rosa, yeah, I'll ask it. And then, okay, so the comprehensive funding for the surfacing streets, at the top, we have identified, Fort Lauderdale Public Works in hand has $500,000 from the general fund and then $1 million from the gas tax. And all the funding sources are spelled out. And so the total right now, we have $1.5 million. And below that, we have, again, these are just assessments. So we have an assessment to do pavement condition that we are now working on task order with one of our city consultants. And for $180,000, and then below that, we also have an assessment that we're going to do for alleyways within the city. And that's the first time that we've actually identified and going to do a condition assessment of the alleyways citywide. And if you are familiar with any alleyways, why there's so much money that we requested for that from the budget was a lot of them are not accessible by cars, they're grown over, they're very unique. The other assessment could be driven with the LiDAR equipment, where somebody drives down the street with the equipment and kind of, captures all the data almost instantaneously. But the alleyways, they have to get on their feet, kind of go trudging through all of them, and we have like 28 miles of that.
Right.
So,
And then we have some Broward County surtax money for resurfacing streets?
Yes, that's also a pending application. Yes.
Okay, Roosevelt, you had a question?
Couple of questions, and one being, since some of the city streets and sidewalks overlap work that Broward County is pending, how you tracking city money from county money, and whether it's surtax money that the county are using, are they using their general funds?
We separate our streets from the county and the DOT. They're all different. I hope I'm answering your question correctly. We don't do a city project on a county road or a DOT road. If it's a county road, it's a county project. Or if it's a DOT road, it's a DOT project. So that's how we separate it based on jurisdiction of the right of way.
But if it's county road, is it county sidewalk?
Typically, yes, 99%, but if there's a separate maintenance agreement and like for instance, south of here on Andrews Avenue, approaching the Riverwalk, there's a separate maintenance agreement where the city 30, 40, 50 years ago said, city will maintain the sidewalks even though it's county jurisdiction on Andrews Avenue. So it's really a case by case, so we have to research some of these older agreements. It's just it's more not, it's more on a case by case rather than citywide. There's only a couple selected county or state roads where the city has agreed to maintain.
And the money that the surtax money that we may or may not get, is that part of the original amount that we may or may not get?
I'll let Karen speak to the most recent with this, because she's our surtax liaison, but I know that the applications that I assembled back in 2020, the same amount that I applied for then, these are the same packages. So it's not any less or any more, it's the same amount of monies. We're just trying to get those monies received.
Okay, Peter?
So, the citywide street assessment, citywide alley assessment, now, can you explain assessment in this context? Is it for work itself, or is it for an evaluation? Or is it even assessing the frontages to pay for something?
The pavement assessment is just getting do you remember the PCI index that I referred to, 1, 2,
Yeah.
maybe 3 presentations? That's assessing just the pavement and its current condition,
The
from
same.
poor all the way up.
The same for alleyways?
Now that is a separate, yes, it's for the alleyways as well, but they had to be broken out separately because the streets, the street and the equipment using the modern technologies can just drive our streets and our right of way and gather that with the LiDAR, LIDAR. The alleyways, they can't really use the LiDAR because the alleyways are,
Yeah.
they're not paved, they're rock, sometimes they're all landscape, some people have built into our easement. So those are, they have to hand do it. It's like they have to put a backpack on and actually walk all those segments.
But is it even likely that we're gonna spend money on alleyways, improving them?
Well, we have to know the condition of the alleyways before we can even ask for future dollars to restore them. There are some alleyways that may not want to be improved, but there's some alleyways, like in Point Santa Park, if anyone's driven behind Southwest 4th Ave, there's an alleyway that's used frequently behind Polo Tropical. And we get a lot of Q alert complaints or, calls in and said, could you please improve this alleyway? Right now, the dollars that we have in the general fund go to streets that are used by thousands of people, not the handful that are using behind the drive-through and cut-throughs. Or the utility companies. A lot of time the utility companies use our alleyways to maintain their equipment.
Nancy, you had something to add?
There's certain alleyways that stormwater operations maintains to ensure that they're providing the drainage function that's intended. So we do regular rock and grade of of certain alleyways to make sure that they're providing for the drainage requirements of that location.
Okay,
So there is constant maintenance on selected locations.
good. Before Ralph, can I just clarify then? Resurfacing streets and sidewalks, we're only talking about local streets and local sidewalks.
Yes,
Okay, so
just
just
city.
the local streets we're talking about.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yes, Ralph?
Yeah, so I alluded to this last meeting, but I just wanna make sure that the city doesn't do what Broward County used to do in resurfacing streets or alleyways. And that is to make sure that the utility department is notified and given an opportunity to put in any new repairs before the resurfacing occurs, so that you don't resurface it, and then the utility goes out there and tears it all up. I'm sure that's part of the city's requirements, is to coordination between streets and utilities.
That's correct. Right now, we just don't have a database of the alleyways.
I knew I could convince you of that. Thank you.
Okay, so, yes, sir, go right ahead.
And I apologize for not being here last week when you went over this, but the Broward County MPO projects, I asked this question a few months back, but who is the ultimate inspector at the end? Is that Broward County comes out and does their final inspection, or does the city of Fort Lauderdale have an inspector that will go to a final?
I can only speak for one project that I was involved in, but I can't speak for all of them. Karen, do you want to
So
speak?
generally, if we don't have, Karen Warfel from the Transportation Department, if we don't have the ability to inspect our transportation, we work with Jill to have a city inspector go out on, if it's a city road.
So Bayview Drive, for instance?
Yeah.
The city is doing the final inspection on Bayview Drive, or we're not sure yet?
We will have to at some,
Okay.
we don't have a schedule for that yet.
Okay, there's
They
no
still got a month or two left.
Thank you.
Yes, James?
Hey, Joe, regarding the alleyways, how much alleyway does the city of Fort Lauderdale have?
We have 28 miles.
28 miles, okay. And the structures or the properties around an alleyway do they get assessed for this at all, or pay property taxes on that or anything? It's like,
Well, right now, we're not improving any alleyways, we just want to see the condition. But because lately it's been opined that we can, because it is city easements, that we can elect to improve them. Like, not everybody wants their alleyway paved, but what happens, like to Nancy's point, we go in and the stormwater group has been great. They maintain the stormwater structures and they put some rock down, and then the next day I get a phone call. Looks great, you cleared out, can you pave my alleyway? We already have a paving plan that, addresses all the others, so that's using general fund money. So I see that in the future, if there's one specific alley or two or maybe more, we would have to ask, put in a budget request and ask for that money to improve it. And it would not be assessed to, it's not like a special assessment, it would just be the city maintaining its own infrastructure.
so the city would always have to pay for these things, so there's no potential to charge a fee to adjacent properties or anything like that are maybe using the alleyway for access to something, or
That's a good point. What happened is, why I wanted to assess the alleyways is that we got a special request and we had to look at, there was an alleyway that was solely used for all these brand new townhomes just north of Las Olas Boulevard. And you wouldn't know it until you actually physically went there. You're like, wow, you've got these $1 million homes and you've got a 8-foot alleyway that everyone is squeezing through. And, we were doing pothole repairs, and it was very uneven, a lot of people were complaining. So, about a year ago, we got the okay to use some of our general fund money to improve this alleyway. And we paved it right before this fiscal year started. So we used a little bit of dollars that we had left over and did that. And that was serving a couple dozen people, but it was so needed, and we had a way So to that, it was using, improving the city's infrastructure for these residents rather than assessing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But
I
we
was
can't
just,
do that for all 28
More of a
miles.
safety hazard.
And there was a lot of, we also
but
improved the
shouldn't the
sidewalks and the
developers
ramps there.
that put
Yeah.
up these condominiums, that,
Yeah.
shouldn't the developers have seen that, or they just assume, oh, the city's gonna take care of this, I don't have to think about it?
Well,
Yeah, okay.
that was one of my first concerns. I said, please show me the permit for these townhomes, because I want to see if they were
should
supposed to build the access to the brand new properties.
Mhm.
But there wasn't anything, and it was just that they relied on the city to improve the access to their homes. So that's a realistic situation, but
No one else in the city's using that alleyway except the people that live there, right? So to me, that's, I
The
don't know,
city
Shane, am I
engineering,
crazy?
building department, no, you're not. Building
So-
department normally catches that, I'm surprised that one didn't. 9 times out of 10 it goes through and it's required to be paved.
I actually have a townhouse project now in my neighborhood, and one of the things at DRC was
Mhm.
you're paving that alley.
Yeah, it's no different than water or
Yeah.
sewer.
Okay.
It's only serving
People are getting stricter about these things. There used to be very,
please.
yeah, yes, Peter.
But there's nothing to prevent a group of people who getting together who all have a frontage to the alley and agreeing to be jointly assessed for its improvement. It's exactly analogous, isn't it, to the undergrounding of electrical in the solar cells. Those people have agreed to be assessed the cost of that. You could do the same with an alley.
we could, but we tried that in the Tarpon River area, and same kind of situation, but it happened like 3 or 4 years ago. And they said we want improvements, and same thing, it kind of must have gotten slipped through the DRC process. And the minute we said, well, you can have it improved tomorrow if you guys will share the cost. I had a cost estimate, but they weren't willing to pay. And then, we had some private, was private, now an easement in certain areas. I don't want to mention it because we're assessing it right now and putting it on the schedule. But we opined, we got an answer back from the city attorney's office, and they said, yes, please, go ahead and improve that. So those people also knew that they could have paid for it, but they elected to ask the city to pay for it. And then we kind of look at it on a case by case and just make sure that it truly is something that's an easement or right of way before we dedicate general fund monies
It seems to me,
and prioritize them.
apropos James's comments, this is not all the money in the world. Whether or not we pave it or they pave it, or, we're not talking about all the money in the world here. I'd like to keep the discussion perhaps at a higher level, because we're going now into the budget cycle. And from my calculations, from looking at this, in FY '23, we had $1,500,000 for resurfacing streets. And for sidewalks, real money, not assessment money, real money, was $1,680,000 for sidewalks, okay? What is your anticipated ask for FY '24?
We kept the levels the same. We did request $500,000 more, with a cumulative, looking at 5 years, but we were asked, because it was a lean budget year with all the other expenses, and Omar could chime in, that they just said, please keep the request at the same level.
Okay, are you gonna go through the whole $1,500,000 lickety split?
Yes, we will.
Okay, well, another 500,000 is not gonna bust the budget, but we'll see how that goes through the process, okay? All right, does anybody have any questions on this portion of it? Okay, so now let's talk about getting some help from Broward County Metropolitan Planning, Florida Department of Transportation, and Surtax funds.
Okay.
I'll come up this way.
Sure.
So I'll talk about transportation mobility in particular, so more of the new capacity, while Public Works is maintaining existing and trying to address some of those issues. So we don't, as we've talked about in past meetings, we don't have any funding in our budget for new capacity,
Right.
but we've been able to do a lot. So we look for other people's money to do those projects, and a lot of times they're part of bigger projects like Bayview or things like that. So we get money sometimes through capital improvement. We have a project that we designed part of it, and I'll talk about that. We designed it, and then we're going for surtax money for implementation. The MPO has competitive grant rounds that we apply every year for, and that's where Bayview was funded through. We also have another one coming up, starting design this year. DOT, sometimes there's improvements that we can get from DOT, and they have safe routes to school money too, but usually DOT money stays on their own streets, like Joe said. Broward County surtax, we've talked about that, we're applying. We're not sure where our $3 million is at for new capacity sidewalks, but it's not gone yet, so that, we're hopeful on that one. And federal grant programs and other small grants that we've gone for to make at least little improvements. So we talked about this one, the sidewalk gap. We've met with Jill, we've had to hand over. Our consultant is doing our task order to get that going, so we'll be moving forward. Lauderdale, it's a bigger project, but it will be improving some sidewalk areas, creating shared use paths and things all across the city. We have $5 million of parks bond to get that started, and that is also in the task order process for design. And the first segments are like leading into Holiday Park, which definitely will include more of a big wide shared use path, not just bike mobility, but pedestrian as well.
The $5 million coming from where?
The parks bond. So as creating this recreational, the intent of the commission had been to create a recreational trail type facility. So in connecting parks, so the first ones are connecting parks, like Holiday Park, Carter Park, Mills Pond Park are our connections to
So
start.
there's actually a plan?
Yeah, there's a whole Lauder Trail plan, there was an advisory board
Yeah,
that
I-
created it, yep. So we're moving forward on phase one, which
Okay.
is the Holiday Park to the Flagler Greenway and Carter Park, and then the Flagler Greenway to Carter Park. And then the 15th, we have a project, 15th Ave that I talked about. We did CIP funding for the design on 15th, Northwest 15th from Carter into Mills Pond Park, and we were able to get it all the way into Mills Pond Park to connect to their trail system. And then that's the first surtax big project that we have funding for. So we're going through the ILA funding agreement right now for that. But it's intended also to be kind of a phase A before one of the Lauder Trail.
So they seem to be amenable to doing sidewalks and connections with their money in bigger projects, but not on our regular sidewalks.
Right, the legal opinion was not as unto itself sidewalk project, but as part of more of a traffic calming type project, they will,
Mobility, yada yada.
Yeah.
Okay,
but they haven't
You know
taken
how to
the
pitch it.
sidewalk money away.
The gap master plan, when you was talking about going down Northwest 15th Avenue into Mill Pond Park, 15th really stops at about 20th. And from there on, you're going across private property, I believe. And are you going to go straight across? Are you gonna go to the entrance to the park, which is about a block away?
We're gonna stay on the west side, all the way up 15th to create the wide path, so it'll be on the park property on the west side, not on the resident property, but there are some sidewalks on the east side, north of 19th. And we've had some requests from the community for those connections across the blocks, cause you can't get off the block, it just goes around and circles.
Right.
So there has been some requests for that as well, but the big project will be on the west side, all along the park and connect right into that gate at the end of the street at Mills
Okay.
Pond Park on 15th.
Okay. And then the main entrance, exit, whatever, which is about another block west.
Yep.
Where you come out of the park, are you going to put sidewalks on that, or are you gonna leave that like it is?
It's not as part of this project, but it can be on the list for future projects, as well as the entrance off of Power Line. There's no sidewalk to enter the park off of Power Line.
Right,
That
that's
is
true.
on my list as well.
Okay.
Different.
let me
So-
ask the group, we've never had a presentation of the Lauder Trail project. Would you be interested in seeing it? The whole part A, part B, and where it's gonna go? Could we do that? Can we put that on the list for another meeting? Thank you. Okay, let's keep going.
So we talked about Broward MPO, they're our regional transportation planning agency. They oversee all the federal money that comes into Broward County. So we have a few of they're called CSLIP, Complete Streets and Other Localized Initiatives. They kind of bundle some of their federal money together in that program. Bayview Drive, that was a $3.5 million project, 2.5 miles of new sidewalk and traffic calming. That project is coming to a close in the next couple months. You'll be seeing that come through. And for a period of time between probably 2014 and this year, DOT managed and all of those CSLIP projects on behalf of the cities, because the cities were having a challenge implementing those funds. That is stopping. So Bayview is our last project with DOT doing the implementation. It has its pros and cons. So then the next one we have coming up is Tarpon River and Shady Banks. Our department did some neighborhood master plans with transportation master plans with both of these neighborhoods. And we were successful in receiving a grant for 2.1 million for the two neighborhoods. There are sidewalks in those as well as traffic calming, so 7th Street and Tarpon, from 9th to Andrews, filling in those gaps. There's some sidewalks on some sides here and there, so filling those gaps in was their priority. And then in Shady Banks, Southwest 14th Court and 12th Court, again, filling in gaps. There's some, but there's missing pieces where the park is in Shady Banks as well. So again, we're using different bigger projects to fill in gaps. Cypress Creek Mobility Hub, this is an independent Broward MPO project. They created a mobility hub program. The downtown mobility hub around the transit station was that money as well. Their second mobility hub is up by their office on North Andrews Way. So the local street is Northwest 59th Court. We're gonna get sidewalks, shared use path out to Power Line from the Tri-Rail. If you're familiar with that Tri-Rail, it's like tucked in, nobody knows where it is. Do that. Andrews Way has some sidewalk, but not all the way down. So that will be another one. And then we're getting on Cypress Creek Road, because we had a collaboration between DOT, MPO, the county, and we were able to push for shared use paths on Cypress all the way beyond even that mobility hub from Northwest 9th to Northeast 9th. Both sides of the road 10-foot wide shared use paths.
Nice.
Just
Nice.
That's major.
Putting 5-foot bike lanes on Cypress Creek is not a smart idea. Nobody's gonna use them, so someone I worked with previously in our office, Christine, was able to really push and get that and everybody on board. And we expanded it even all the way to Northeast 9th. We're excited about that. That's in design. I know, Marilyn, you had asked me to do. So the first one's almost done. Shady Banks, we're just going through the DOT process to ramp up for design. Cypress Creek is finishing design. Construction will be in probably a year or so. Prospect Road, it's the same CSLIP, but sometimes other cities lead the initiatives and we just have little pieces within their projects and we cross boundaries together. So Prospect Road and Florinata are both examples of those. Prospect, where there'll be some missing gaps, kind of the southwest side of the FXE airport. They're finishing some sidewalks up there and that's in construction. Florinata is just starting design. And it's Oakland Park led, but we have one teeny little block by the Macy's where there's a missing sidewalk and they're gonna fill that in the Macy's furniture store there. So that'll be filled in.
So it seems like the big bucks come from Broward MPO as part of other projects.
Yes.
And that's the only money we actually have working right now for filling gaps. We don't have any city money for filling
Not at this
gaps.
time, no.
But we do have city money for a study of filling the gaps.
Yes.
We actually have it, or they didn't fund it.
They
didn't fund
did,
it?
we have it. So I am hopeful as a planner that this plan will help us. We've had all the list of
Areas.
people complaining, but we've never had a holistic study done. We just know what people have asked for, so this will help us in using the LiDAR data that's being done with the stormwater folks to have the baseline. It'll help us get that done easier.
Are you gonna let a contract in FY '23 to get this work done? Are you gonna do
We're
it in-
using our CCNA, our on-call consultants, so we already reached out to them to start the task order process.
Excellent, okay, yes.
As you do this work, are we keeping in mind ADA compliance?
Absolutely, always.
Yes, Ralph.
On Bayview Drive projects, on the 2 traffic circles, are they really and truly a traffic circle as opposed to a roundabout, or
Yes.
there's a difference?
Yes. Some are bigger with yielding and others are little and
But the ones on Bayview are traffic circles by definition,
I believe so, yes.
okay, as opposed to a roundabout.
Yeah.
That's probably a lot of right of way for a traffic circle, but
Yeah, it's
Speaking,
semantics.
Yes, I think
I
so.
would say they were roundabouts.
And speaking of big projects, the new big project that we're everybody's buzzing about is the flyover at Federal and Sunrise, which is going into project
PD&E.
D&E, right. That's been on the books for like forever. And lucky it was shovel ready. And it's going, and that's, people are gonna be very surprised when everybody realizes what's going on over there.
I had a graduate course in traffic. I did a traffic circle, there's one right on the University of Maryland campus. And I got up on the physics building, I took a diagonal shot. And there was, at that time, there was somebody trying to veer to the left to go around as opposed to the right. And the professor got with me and he says, Ralph, which one of your friends did you get?
Did you
I
get
said,
to
no,
do
this was just
that?"
spontaneous. And I said, it turned out to be a positive because they didn't put keep right signs around so that it keeps the traffic in its proper perspective. But, yeah, that's memories.
Yes, okay.
Flashing back.
So that's Broward MPO, how about Broward Surtax? Is that the next one?
Yes, the
All
next one
right.
is Broward Surtax. So as I talked about Northwest 15th Ave, that was our first capital project that we received in the original go-around in 2020. It's converting the existing west side sidewalk to a shared use path to connect Carter Park into Mills Pond Park. And we are going up there. Traffic calming is a big thing, and lighting. There have been a lot of fatalities on Northwest 15th. That's why it is our priority. Everybody cuts through from Sunrise to 19th very quickly through there, and there's only one stop sign that some folks stop at, not a lot. So we're excited to move that through. We're doing all the back and forth with the county on their ILA funding agreement, but that's moving forward. The design's done, we did it with CIP. The sidewalk gap, we talked, this is the surtax money. So we have $3 million into the county surtax project for design and implementation of filling gaps. Like currently it's not moving forward just yet, but they haven't removed it yet, so we're excited. James.
Karen, just so I'm clear, the Broward County surtax is the 1 cent
Yes.
tax? And the Broward MPO, did you say those were federal dollars that they distribute?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Thank you.
And then another example of a federal grant that we just finished, it was a couple months ago, February, I think, was a Tiger project, and now they call them RAISE grants, but they're the kind of the big federal infrastructure ones. The MPO received a regional grant, and there were other cities involved, not just us, but Riverland Road received improved sidewalks, and we made them up to 5-foot wide concrete sidewalks in all but one little spot that Jill's gonna help us with. So we did that, and it included the other streets here. So I don't have the exact amount that was in Fort Lauderdale, but it was 11.4 million overall. So we look if we can partner with the MPO on projects that they're doing in a bigger regional area. They came to us and said, do you have anything that would be in this area? And they had the links that they wanted to do. So we had that with the neighborhood and the community that had asked us, so we were ready to go on that one. By others, it's not just about our street we talked about earlier. What about county streets? We don't overlap with the county work, but the county does their own work. So 56th Street, between Imperial Point and Knoll Ridge, they're getting sidewalks on both sides of the street there. It's in construction now. And then through that, Coleridge Isles asked, hey, what about us? We only have sidewalk on one side. We'd love to have the sidewalk on the south side too, or the north side, or I forget which side it was. On the other side as well, so we requested that of the county. They looked at it and they have programmed that to be done too. It'll be a few years from now. And then ADA, like Mr. Walters talked about, the county is doing a lot of ADA improvements on their roads across the county with their surtax money, their portion of it. So they did all of Andrews and Third. They've updated, over the last few months, you'll see them. They've done a bunch of patches and all the ramps. And then McNabb Road, they added a sidewalk on the south side, all along the south side of McNabb Road. It's a little hokey, but they did it.
Question regarding ADA sidewalk. I know on northeast 21st Road between 62nd and McNabb, there was a program several years back where they put in some ADA sidewalks, but it wasn't continuous. I mean, you had some places in there where it wasn't, continuous but going between those streets. And I just wonder when that's gonna be ever completed.
It's on my list, Ralph, it is. From the church up,
Well, it's from 62nd Street.
yeah,
Right there up to McNabb, and it's, of course, Pompano Beach city limits come back, so, I mean, but they don't have a problem there on McNabb on there, but it's just, a continuous application of the ADA sidewalks. It's on the, west side,
yeah, I'm aware,
okay.
it's on my list
So, okay,
someday.
I get asked that every once in a while, says, well, why didn't I, so it was probably a funding program where they were able to resurface the road and they were able to get the ADA sidewalks in those areas, but they didn't do it on the other area. Did I tell a lie?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But there is a gap missing there, and we are aware, yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
And then funding we have applied for and we're waiting to hear. We have asked for the sidewalk gap infill construction money through the CIP as well, not knowing what's gonna happen for surtax, so we have done that. Parks bond connections, we looked at all the parks bond projects and saw where there's not connections to those parks. West of Powerline Road at Chateau Park, there's a new park there, but there's no sidewalks on that street. So including those sidewalk requests or other places we've included. We have some preliminary planning money in the CIP in the 5th year, but we don't have anything past that. South Middle River, we're having a lot of challenges with speeding and safety through their neighborhood, and Northwest 7th Ave is horrific. So looking at, can we put sidewalks on Northwest 7th Ave to at least allow pedestrians to be off the side of the street, so we put that request in. And Northeast 4th Street, we're in design now, and we have some funding in the 5th year to implement, there's developments happening, but there's still gaps. And that's a really busy street now with everything happening between US 1 and 3rd, so filling those gaps in.
Can I ask you on the city capital improvement program, is that FY '23 or FY '24 money?
These are requests we put in through this cycle for 5 years from now.
Okay, so this is not money we have, this is,
No, it's
this is
requests.
the wish list.
This is the wish list this
Wish
year
list.
that we put in that were related to sidewalks, yes. And then the requests we put in this year for surtax that include sidewalks are Middle Street and Sebo Bend. So behind the Fleet Yard, there's missing sidewalk segments on Middle Street. So we put that in as a request from the neighborhood association, and 26th Street is one that we've been putting into the C-SLIP over the last couple of years. So there's, we have the Bayview Drive project, but there's no sidewalks to connect you from Bayview Drive to US 1, and folks are walking in the street, there's a lot of traffic on there. So adding a sidewalk on the north side of that, and then redoing their traffic calming as well.
Could you just tell me what C-SLIP means?
Complete streets and other localized initiatives.
Got it.
And then we would get requests, all of us get requests each year if there's any projects for earmark considerations, and the ones we put in that include sidewalks are, I talked about the Lauderdale Manors, park connections on Chateau Park Drive, the Holiday Park entrance connection. To implement some of that, can we use other money and put our $5 million longer? The South Middle River, again, we're trying all efforts for those projects to improve mobility, including sidewalks, and then the general parks ones that I talked. So we usually look at all different funding options and kind of put our projects, our priorities into all different categories to see where we can get our money and see what comes out. So not just one egg in one basket. And then I think I'll hand it over to Matt.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Cobb. I'm the Assistant Risk Manager at the city. Risk management is the city's basically internal insurance fund. So we are the ones that get to budget and pay for the trip and fall claims that happen on the sidewalks when they're not maintained and they degrade. So we were asked to put together a spreadsheet to kind of give a breakdown. The way claims work, obviously, is the state has a 4-year statute of limitations, which means from the date that the incident occurred, someone has 4 years to sue us, and then obviously litigation can take any time past that. So we did 11 years worth of data so that you could kind of get a good perspective of what the costs are, because a lot of the current years, as you can see, we have open claims. And so those are still active, ongoing litigation. And then in the most recent 4 years, we have claims that maybe haven't been reported to us that are sitting out there that we might get a lawyer letter on within the next 3 to 4 years. So the best numbers obviously are the older numbers from 2012 through 2016, because those have pretty much almost no claims open still, to kind of give a perspective of what we pay. So on average, the city gets about 32 claims a year for trip and falls on our sidewalks. And again, these are city-maintained sidewalks. As you all heard, there's 3 entities in the city that have sidewalks: FTOT, Broward County, and the city. We a lot of times get a lot of reports for other sidewalks that aren't maintained by us. We forward those to the proper entity that is responsible for those. They handle their claims, we handle our claims, we share with each other whenever it comes across. We get to know each other very well in the different organizations. So this kind of gives you, so we have 32 claims on average a year. The average claim cost is about $30,000 for a claim. So when someone falls on a city sidewalk, it's about $30,000, which is a combination of either paying for their bodily injury and their attorney fees, or paying for the city's attorney fees that defend the case. So it all really just depends. So, but the average across all the claims we get, it's about $30,000 to litigate a claim or settle a claim.
And the person doesn't get a whole hell of a lot out of that.
They get 25%. So
Wow.
so whatever we pay them in settlement, I mean, their attorney gets 25%, and that's after they've paid their medical liens, and then they get the remainder. So it's probably about 25% if you figure. You know, most the average medical cost on a claim, depending on what it is. If somebody, most common injuries are fractures to the wrist, sometimes a knee or something like that, and those run anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 in medical.
And do we deal with these in our attorney's office here, or do we farm these out?
It's a combination. So we use in-house risk management adjusters, which are city employees that handle the claim pre-suit. So they do all the investigation, working with Public Works to identify the area, does the city maintain it, and they do all the workup on the claim. Then it gets assigned either to outside counsel. The city employs 3 different outside counsel firms that handle claims on a rotating basis. And we also have an internal, a lawyer assigned that handles some claims too. So it's a mixture, so because there's only so many that they can handle.
Got it, okay.
And then kind of give you a breakdown of the average, like I said, is $30,000 for a claim, and the average annual cost to the city is about $370,000. Is what we spend to settle trip and fall claims on sidewalks. And then to give you a breakdown of where claims are happening in the city, we divide the city into 4 quadrants. At Broward and Andrews is our 0 point. So not surprisingly, most of our claims happen in the northeast and the southeast quadrant of the city. So that would be east of Andrews and either north or south of Broward Boulevard.
You said not surprisingly, why not surprisingly?
Well, that's the older section of the city, so that was the first section of the city built, has the most, the most aged sidewalks, shall we say. Those are also primarily, our major tourist hub and, infrastructure and stuff like that. So the western part of the city is like most western cities, is more suburbs and stuff like that. Those sidewalks don't get as much heavy use. And what I mean by that is not just physical foot traffic, but also what damages sidewalks. Vehicles driving over them, typically heavy equipment, delivery trucks. Those are the kinds of things that really tear up our sidewalks in those quadrants of the city. Is the big trucks that are you see parking along the sidewalks, and or because the streets are narrower, they're turning to make deliveries and they're taking out the curbs and stuff like that.
A lot of them are more susceptible because they're not as thick as the 6-inch currently.
That is also correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do people sue the adjacent property owners, or they just sue you?
Yes. So liability, when the city settles claims, liability most likely is split 3 ways. So obviously, the entity that is the owner of the sidewalk bears responsibility. The person that fell could bear some responsibility, and then the adjacent property owner could bear some responsibility. So the adjacent property owner by ordinance is responsible to notify the city that there is a hazard, a defect, and help us maintain them in good order. So if they failed to do that, that's where their negligence can come in. And then, obviously the city is the maintaining entity, we have the greatest share of negligence. And then depending on, what type of hazard it is, what kind of shoes the person was wearing, the lighting, what they were doing that contributed to their fall, they might share some responsibility in the accident.
Interesting. Any questions?
Well,
Yes.
this is probably a question for Jill. Seeing these numbers, where my son lives in Orlando, they have an extensive program of grinding where the slabs are, bit between the two.
Misaligned.
Have you considered, has the city considered doing that on a proactive basis?
We do. We actually have a line item in our existing contract for grinding. We do that wherever it's feasible. It's a lot less money. It's just some of the slabs are displaced so much that you can't grind. But we actually were approached a couple years ago by a grinding only company, and their costs compared to our costs in their annual contract that we bid out was almost 4 times. So we've got a bargain in our existing annual, and we do grind. It's just what happens is Matt calls me and says, someone fell at this location, so if I wanted to grind, let's say a whole city block the next week, I now have to reprioritize and go repair where the alleged trip and fall happened, either in the street or on the sidewalk or what at that location. So we are proactive until we have to reprioritize. And we have to make that $1.5 million stretch.
Right, so we spend on average, 370,000 every year. And every penny that we put into repairing sidewalks goes towards knocking that number down. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Yes.
A lot of times, the sidewalks that are displaced or uplifted usually caused by some reason, such as a tree root that's growing laterally over and it uplifts that. Is there any provision to make sure that the cause is analyzed and eliminated where possible?
Yes, that's part of the inspection after the accident. So once we are notified that an accident occurred, that's we send out a scene investigator to locate it, and then Public Works sends out their own investigator to put it on their sidewalk repair list and prioritize the type of hazard it is according to their ranking system. And yeah, one of the things we look for is was it a tree root that caused it? Unfortunately, there are a lot of old growth trees in the city which are very beneficial for providing shade coverage and stuff like that, but they really weren't planned well, for the type of median and their locations, so.
I guess also if it's the owner's tree, that throws in another
And
ching for
that-
the owner.
Exactly, and that's where they could become liable, because,
And then you gotta be careful that if you do eliminate some of the roots, that you don't make the tree
a
Unstable.
hazard,
more
yep.
susceptible of.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
that's terrific, thank you. That's the first time I've
Very good.
understood this.
That's very good, yeah. So I had one question for Karen.
Sure.
Karen, so, a lot of great information. So in my neighborhood, if we wanted to fix a stretch of sidewalk that's, starts and stops and starts and stops, what happened? How do you do it? I mean, is it gonna be 5 years minimum? I mean, how does that work?
At this point, so you wanna repair old and fix new,
I
add
wanna
new?
add new where there's the gaps, and I don't think the old has to be fixed, but maybe there would be a little of that.
I do 18 streets on my
Yeah.
list, I'm aware, yes. So I think those things are on our list already as priorities that have been requested.
Okay, so
When
they're
we
on the
look
list
at it,
somewhere.
and we wouldn't have restrictions necessarily, if we have to upgrade to ADA improvements or there's things with the old, we do that with some of the big projects where there may be an existing sidewalk, but it's damaged or it has issues, so we can take it out and fix it and make sure it's 5 foot, which is a standard.
Thank you.
When you do a sidewalk, do you also coordinate with some portion of the city that does the swales, that deals with making the swales retain water? Or do you just do the sidewalk and you don't even look at the swale?
Whenever a sidewalk gets put in, the swale is looked at and regraded to meet better swale.
So part of your sidewalk project is to assess the condition of the swale and also deal with that from a drainage perspective.
Yeah, we get the cross section from the stormwater folks, so when we share the city standard cross section for the swale with the design team, so that whenever they touch the sidewalk, they regrade the swale. And you'll see Riverland Road was an example of that. They redid, wherever they put a sidewalk in, they redid it. And with the federal money, I can't do a swale on the other side of the road just because, but if we're touching the sidewalk, then they can do the swale regrade. So again, Riverland Road, they can regrade the swale where the sidewalk is, but I can't fix the issues with the swale on the other side.
Okay, so it's good to know that in connection with, it's not just the sidewalk, we're dealing with drainage as well.
Yeah, good.
It's good, it's good. All right, well, thank you very much. I think this was, I know for me, this was extremely helpful to see all the little bits and pieces come together.
Yeah.
So,
They need
okay.
more money.
Everybody needs more money apparently, but what they need,
Yes,
what they need is they need to be able to pull out some of the money from these other funding sources that appear to be much more, what shall I call it, rich in terms of where the money can
But I
come from.
will add an asterisk, even though they're rich, they're very competitive. So the MPO only awards 3 projects for the whole county in their C-SLIP grant. So, we don't get one every year anymore. We're lucky if we get one, because there's only 3 out of all the applications across the county. And then, the federal ones, of course, are super competitive for those. But they are more likely to give larger dollars.
Okay, cool. All right, any other questions on this subject? Okay, moving on. Funding for the water treatment plant, actually, this is the main event. Funding for the water treatment plant.
Alright, so Susan and Anthony will be joining us about 3:15, so we can jump to new business and come back to the old business.
Will do. Alrighty. New business, bypass road and new pipe to the injection wells at the treatment plant. I think this is yours, Christopher?
Probably, yes.
Okay. Tell us about it.
Alright,
For those
so-
people, wait a minute, for those people who are not aware, can't imagine, I've been doing this for 15 years, I can't imagine nobody is not aware of the Port Bypass Road. But in the event that you are not aware, 15 years ago, there was a proposal to put a Port Bypass Road from State Road 84 through the port to Eisenhower Boulevard, exclusive, so that it didn't impinge upon the port. It was like a flyover, it was a big flyover, so that you could get the traffic coming from the south and the west all the way over to the bridge going to the beach without impacting 17th Street, without going through the convention center and the port. Okay? That was proposed, it was designed, it was funded, and then it was killed. Bless you, Rodstrom, okay? And for about 5 years, we were living in the desert. We couldn't get that thing back on track. Then the convention center decided that they were really gonna build a convention center hotel. And it was part of the DRI process. And there was a discussion about, well, if we don't do the bypass road, maybe we'll just open up 20th Street and run all the traffic through the neighborhood. That did not fly well. But eventually, the convention center people and the city decided that the better part of valor was to resurrect the bypass road, so that we could divert all this traffic. And now it's not, my understanding, it's not a flyover, it's a I'll know more tomorrow night, it's more of a on grade and maybe up on a berm and similar situation to get all that traffic coming from south and west through the convention center like it used to be. Remember? No, I don't get you, maybe you remember? Many years ago, you used to be able to drive through the port. Now, security, you can't drive through the port, so there had to be an exclusive way to get from the south and the west through the port onto the bridge, the 17th Street Bridge to get all that traffic. Because the truth of the matter is, if you do origin and destination studies, which we did on 17th Street as part of the task force, the majority of the traffic is through traffic on 17th Street. Much to our amazement, the majority is through traffic. So now it was resurrected, it's being redesigned, it's actually been funded, and we're waiting with bated breath to see how it's going to go. As a matter of fact, it has to be done prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy for the hotel. That's part of the deal. These things slip, but that's part of the deal. That's the aspiration, okay? So now we're gonna find out the challenges that this road is facing vis-a-vis some sewer projects that have to be done. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So what is the challenge?
Well, so first of all, for those who don't know the details, the effluent force main coming out of GTL going to the injection wells roughly runs from the plant to Eisenhower, down to 20th, down 20th, down 14th. Anyways, all the way to the well fields, which are back behind the Publix area. The new pipe is gonna roughly run the same pathway, and in order to build the new effluent force main, which is required per DEP consent order, to have redundancy to the well fields, that effluent line is going down Eisenhower on the east side of the road, which is where they plan on having the elevated light rail stand at some point in the future, if they actually build a light rail from the airport to the port. And then as we go down, get closer to the entrance to the convention center and start turning down 20th and cross back over Eisenhower to go down 20th, right there is where one of the elevated portions of that bypass road you're talking about is actually dropping down and becoming normalized with Eisenhower to each to 17th. So where we're building our brand new force main, it's gonna have to be coordinated with basically that new, for lack of better terms, intersection with the flyover or the elevated roadway that's diving down. Timing wise, we have all kinds of restrictions put on us that we're actually working through the county right now with our ILA for our force main project. And one of the timing things that they're putting on us is timing of getting out of Eisenhower so they can have full access unrestricted to the convention center and the new hotel, as well as Disney Cruises is gonna be starting to go out of there in 25, I think. So we gotta get out of Eisenhower because of that. And then we gotta get across that intersection at 20th and Eisenhower. If I remember correctly, early 25, late 2024, because of the construction of the Eisenhower bypass road, which is expected to be in construction roughly around the same time as we're putting that pipe through there. So this is all 2024, 2025 construction years that they'll be doing the road at the same time as we're doing our force main pipe.
Wow. That's complicated.
Yeah, and the ILA is overcomplicated also because of all these things going on at the same time. Of course, the county, as they said very bluntly, we don't want your pipe. So we're having fun times working through the ILA agreements as to any kind of liquidated damage terms that they want to put on us if we don't get out of their roads fast enough and so on and so forth. So that's what we've been dealing with for probably about the last 6 months, is working through all this with the county.
There is no other way to get to where you need to go?
We've looked at approximately 10 different routes, most of which would probably quadruple the cost of the project, because you'd have to go on the other side of 17th through neighborhoods, basically up north, over west, back down south, through the backside, and somehow maybe snake through the neighborhoods on the south side of 17th through that area where you were saying before 20th Street was looked at as a road possibly through the port. We'd have to come back in the other direction, and all the other options we found were either not feasible at all or just between 4, 5, maybe even 10 times the cost, because it would be 5 times the length of pipe.
Did you say that the well field, the injection, not the well field?
Yes,
The injection wells are behind Publix?
generally speaking, yes. So if you actually go
No.
if you go around the back side of that Publix facility, Total Wine and More, right, there's a little
Right,
roadway
right.
that goes south through the parking lot. And when you go south through there, if I remember correctly, there's one little street that you cross over, and then just a little ways down, there's the entrance to our well fields facility.
They're closer to 22nd Street, if I remember right.
Yeah, the actual street's 22nd, I believe.
I gotta go back there and take a look at
Yep.
it, but I trust you, I'm sure you've looked really seems to me, yeah, go on.
So theoretically, isn't Eisenhower within the port and 84 within the port still on the books as public rights of way?
Yes, so the roads are still public right of way, which is why we're able to put the pipe there. So it's not so much a question of whether or not we're allowed to do it, it's a question or not of whether the county wants to work with us to make it doable or
So they can't say no, right?
correct. Well,
Well,
There's a
They
lot
can
of
make
conflicts.
it, they can make it awkward, but they never extinguish the right of way through there.
correct. And that's never been part of the conversation as to whether or not the right of way is available for our utility to go through. It's always just been a matter of we're conflicting with their planned openings and they just don't want our pipe in their way, especially for the potential building of the light rail that's coming into the port. So where our pipe is going, we're trying to needle thread it through where they think, and I use air quotes on that, where they think the foundations for their flyover, for their train station, elevated train station is gonna go. So we have a napkin drawing of where the pilings might be for a future train that may or may not come, that we're having to work around. We'll see how we do.
I mean, they've been talking about the bypass for now, ever since the road was closed, post 9/11.
Mhm.
They've been talking about the light rail, which is a good idea between the airport and the port, and they've been talking about that for 40 years or something, so.
and we need the pipe more than we need the train, well, that's an opinion, so that's neither here nor there.
We have to have
I
the
think
pipe.
we need the pipe
Pipe.
more than the rail. The county's view is they need that transportation connection. They have all these other demands that they would like to see that right of way be used for. So it's trying to come up with a solution that meets all the needs.
I mean, physically, is there enough room in there?
There's physically enough room to build it. The problem is where they're estimating the piles for the light rail bridge coming in, as well as us trying to avoid county property on 20th Street, where they are, I'll use air quotes again, planning on building maybe a garage, maybe a public works facility for the county on 20th Street, where we need to encroach partially into their property. So we had to work around how are we gonna fit our pipe down 20th, because the road's full of not only utilities, gas lines, unknown lines, contamination, so forth. And then there's massive overhead transmission lines for FPL running in the swale where we would normally actually run this big pipe. So we are having to encroach on the county property that we're having to coordinate that effort with also. So it's been a lot of fun convincing the county to let us do this. But there is room, physically speaking, down Eisenhower. The biggest problem is there are restrictions on us for construction. And that is they want at all times 5 lanes of traffic.
What?
They want 5 lanes of traffic open at all times while we're building our pipe. So basically, we're restricted to just 1 lane because we can widen it temporarily if we need to. We're restricted to trying to install a 54-inch force main with only 1 lane of space. So it's gonna be a lot of sheet pile, 1 to 2 sticks a day if we're lucky, temporary backfill plates, and we disappear. And we come back and we re-expose everything, 1 to 2 sticks of pipe, backfill, compact, leave for the next day. It's gonna be a very slow process doing not even 1,000 feet of pipe.
So going down 20th Street is not the issue. It's only that segment of Eisenhower to get to 20th.
Yeah, so 20th Street is an issue because we need to get an agreement to get on county property to put our pipe, but they've relaxed a little bit for us to do that, so that's not so much of an issue now. But yes, Eisenhower is the main
That's
problem.
the main problem. And you can't go backwards through the shopping center to 10th Avenue and back to 20th.
So there is logistical problems trying to get this large of a pipe down the street that is essentially the entrance street to our plant. And then
Yeah,
you
18th,
pop out into what was essentially the parking lot of
Publix,
there or
right?
Firehouse Subs. And then we would go southward through the parking lot. But the problem is getting our pipe through our plant facilities that are in the ground there and actually getting our pipe squeezed through that to get to the parking lot in the first place.
Uh-huh.
So there's really not enough room to construct our pipe through there at all. And there's very large, influent lines, 72-inch
That's
plus or
the big
minus.
line that comes in. Oh, we can't mess with that, cause
Can't mess with
we'll
that,
be
so
dead.
that restricts us a lot with space to get our pipe even through there in the first place, and then the property owners, we would probably have to do eminent domain if we wanted to deal with those property owners.
You can't bore it? Bore it under? Directional drill?
An option to get through that property through drilling is definitely an option, but still you're putting a utility on a property that doesn't have easements, so we'd still have to deal with the property owner.
Oh, it's Jack Close, it shouldn't be so bad. It's
We,
only a matter of money to him, yes, yes.
With all these zigzags that you're talking about taking, especially down Eisenhower to 20th, isn't the convention hotel is right there in the way?
so the hotel isn't the problem in terms of where the structures and facilities are for the hotel or the convention center. The problem is purely the timing of us getting in and out of Eisenhower and cross to 20th, so that way we're out of Eisenhower. And this is all boils down to that restriction that they put on us with the number of lanes that they're demanding to have accessible at all times. So hotel infrastructure isn't the problem, it's timing and them restricting our workspace.
Okay, Peter,
So this has been a lateral thinking caused by visiting Germany. Why did you stick the pipe in the air? It's not the most lovely area in the world. And now that a pipe stuck up in the air, you know, it wouldn't reduce the visual amenities. It makes it a lot simpler to thread it through. It's certainly not impossible to do that. It's just not the done thing. Everybody thinks underground. But they're all over the place in Germany. Sewer pipes stuck up 20 feet plus in the air.
So we may not have considered elevated pipe for the entire route and just set up. We put it on pilings and we can get it however we want, wherever we want. But we did look into a lot of areas where we either plan on doing aerial or where we would need to in order to make the route work. Like for instance, the talk just now about getting over into Jack Lose's property and down south through there. We would have to actually go aerial across, what was that, I guess, 18th Street and then squeezing through our property there because of all the underground utility conflicts. So we were actually gonna run it along that property line, aerial, until we got to Losa's property. But again, getting it through Losa's property and having to deal with that coordination and acceptance was something that we just were not able to do. Then going Eisenhower, 20th and all that, those areas were not considered for aerial. I cannot speak as to exactly why, other than obviously aesthetics is an issue, especially with the hotel and convention center redo that's going on there. And on 20th, going aerial versus going underground, the only thing that you're saving is you don't have to have a 10-foot wide trench to put a 6-foot or 5-foot wide pipe in the ground. So during construction, aerial would be easier, but in the end, it doesn't make much of a difference. There is room to put the pipe there, it's just constructing it is difficult.
But anyway, you've thought about all that, so, you know, you're considering it a partial option.
Yeah, we definitely consider it, and the final layout currently actually does have an elevated portion. Not that it really matters for the majority of the route, but the line that after goes off of 14th Avenue to the backside of the well fields, that will be elevated aerial.
I'll be happy to pick out a colour for you.
okay, well, this is very illuminating. How much is this gonna cost and is it in the CIP already?
So it is in the CIP and it's funded to the best of our estimating skills without, because this is a DCP, a design criteria package for design build. So it's really, you're talking class 4 level estimating, if you're familiar with that. It's basically very preliminary estimates. And we have what we believe is enough between what's currently in the CIP and what's requested for 2024. So we do believe that we have enough, but you know, these things, we just had a project recently that was almost double what we estimated, so
So the enough is how much?
roughly 30 million.
Okay. My, how these numbers add up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
well, keep us informed how it's going. I mean, I particularly am concerned. Yeah, it's big money. All right, well, we gotta keep that major infrastructure hopping and jumping. I mean, are we under any court order to get the second pipe, or are we just being prudent?
Yes, so this is part of the consent order for sewer. And the time frame of getting it done per consent order, of course, is September or whatever of 2026. But not only is that going to be a tight time frame for us, as long as we can keep on the schedule we're on now, but the timeframes that are even harder for us are gonna be the ones with the county. That whole Eisenhower, they want us out of there by, if I remember correctly, May of 2025. And the way we're estimating the work to be done, it's gonna be really close.
Okay, all right. So some of that bond money is it being fully funded by bond money or bond money plus CIP?
Right now, this project is partially bond and partially CIP, but if we need more, it'll probably be coming out of the bond.
The existing one that's being spent down or the new one coming up?
We would have to really
Existing.
go back and look at the old bond, try and use that money first and then rearrange the CIP
Okay,
for projects that we know can come later on.
I got you.
And in most cases, these last remaining 4 or 5 consent order related projects, which are all in the 15 to 30+ million dollar price range, they're all partially CIP, partially bond, and the plan is, we'll, as Alan mentioned, we'll have to rejig some of the funding bond-wise to get these fully funded, because these have to happen on an expedited path. And then the projects that currently have some of the, we'll just call it the older bond money in it, that aren't on that fast path or not quite in construction yet, they will have to actually just be earmarked for the next bond.
Okay, so we'll switch the
Yeah.
the necessary ones into the money that we already have
Yes,
and put those into the other ones that we don't really need to do right away, we put that into the new one.
yes.
When's the anticipated taking down of the second $200 million?
It'll
Next
be-
year.
Next year, in
Yeah,
24?
we initially were thinking it was gonna be 23, cause it was every 5 years and those were issued in 18. But given the fact that there are balances, and we have a few other debt issues that we're using this year, that we've moved that to 24.
Good, well, that's good. Okay, well, anybody got any questions on this? No? All right, let's get right back to the main event, which is, let's talk about funding for our water treatment plant. That's Susan, right?
So I wasn't clear what we were talking about, so Anthony and I had just gotten an email that said you wanted us to come in and talk about, we thought it was the
Lomar capacity issue.
capacity issue. But I'll give you a quick update on,
Actually, you were the one who told us that you wanted to come and talk to us.
yeah, June,
about-
in June.
Oh, in June, oh, okay.
In June, yeah, so I just got some preliminary numbers, we've run, well, I'll give you an update, we've run 4 scenarios. One, 30-year with level debt service, a 40-year with level debt service, a 30-year with wrap debt service, and a 30-year wrap debt service, but with multiple issuances. So we've had our financial advisor run us those 4 scenarios. We ran them through the rate model, and I just got those on Friday, so I'm reviewing them now to give them some feedback. So the plan is to come back to you in June with those detailed rate scenarios.
Okay, question. When we approved the P3, okay, we approved it at a set amount of money per gallon, $1.61 for the first year, okay, with a
With the
scheduled.
escalators,
With
5%
the
of
scheduled
the,
escalators, okay. And that ended up being 1.44 billion. And we all talked and we all stood up in public and said, this is gonna cost us $1.44 billion. Is it gonna still cost us 1.44 billion?
There are no changes in the contract.
That's what I'm thinking. I just wanna make
Yeah.
sure.
So, and then obviously that doesn't include our debt service piece. And again, we won't know the cost of capital until we issue the debt. But when we ran it at 4.5%, which is kind of what it's looking at. Can that go up? Can that go down? We're gonna issue in October. But that's really the only variable. I know there's some chemical costs that may be variable now. Alan's talked about the cost of chlorine, which has gone up a lot since
We were
then, but that
always-
would have happened
Anyway, we were always
Either
gonna
way.
pay for the chemicals, we were always gonna pay for the electricity, we were always gonna pay for the labor. But the cost of that, building the plant is still $485,
Yep,
it was
that
a
has not
fixed cost.
changed.
And our cost was $181, and that may escalate, we all appreciated the fact that that was not a guaranteed price.
Mhm.
So the total amount that we're going out for bonding, not necessarily initially, but the total amount that we're gonna have to bond for this is the combination of those two numbers.
So the 485 times 75%, that's 363 plus the 181, oops, not 11. You know, it's hard doing math in front of a crowd.
I knew I should have brought my slide rule.
Abacus, we need an abacus.
So it's hard doing math in front of a crowd.
No pressure.
544.75.
What's
500
a little bit we said we were gonna do
Yeah, for
internal costs.
yeah, some owner's rep stuff on top of that, but 585 million-ish.
585 million,
Or 545 million-ish.
45. So we have to find 545 million, and that's our obligation. The 121 that they're putting in, we pay for that actually.
That's included in
the rate
that
structure.
1,000,004, yeah.
Right, so it's not like we got any free money from them of 121, we're paying for that.
Right, that's included in that availability
And
payment.
I don't care how much money they have to pay to borrow that money.
Right.
It's still 121.
Correct.
Okay, this is good. All right, because we want, these things morph, all right? We just were discussing about that, it's very scary, these things all of a sudden morph. Oh, we didn't think of this, or this went up or that. And that would be an incredible betrayal of the public, because we sold this on that.
Well, like I said, the chemicals are variable. The rate that we issue the debt is, we'll know that like a week or so before we issue.
So when you said you ran it through the rate structure, so the first year is not necessarily gonna be 1.61 cents.
No, that doesn't kick in until year 3. I mean, we don't pay them anything until the
Until
plant
it's built.
is commissioned.
Okay, but
So we would only be paying, the impact on rates is just the cost of the debt issuance
of borrowing this
in
money,
year 1, yeah.
so
And that would be this October.
it's really gonna, I'm a homeowner, and I'm anticipating 3 years down the road, it's gonna be $1.61 a gallon. That's what they told us it was gonna be. But it's really not gonna be $1.61, it's gonna be more than that, because it's gotta be, we gotta borrow 500 and something $million. Have you got any idea what that new number is gonna be yet?
They weren't unlike the ones that we've shown before. The 139% over, that 10-year period, they're not unlike that. Again, I just got it on Friday and didn't get to look at it all.
I won't press you, we'll have enough time to go over.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I didn't want to bring anything that wasn't cooked.
Okay, so
Well, thanks
that's
for your
what,
update.
yeah, that
There
was
you
very
go.
good, yes, Peter.
So, but you're still looking for grant sources, right?
Yes, especially as it relates to the enabling works, because we are procuring those ourselves. For the cost of the plant, probably not, just because they're procuring it. And when you get any of those federal or state grants, you have to do a lot of the hoops, right? You have to, Davis-Bacon, Buy American, and those type of things, which on the other hand could bring up the cost of the project. So on the stuff that we're procuring ourselves, yes, we're looking at that.
I had an email, circulated email to people in Oakland Park. They're building a new public works complex, so it's not a water treatment plant, it's an administrative office. But they said they're getting, it's only $1 million they're getting from FEMA. Hazardous mitigation grant program, but amounts like that, if you have to deal with all sorts of
It's not worth it.
bureaucry, it's not worth it.
True. But the federal grants and the state grants, they might be worth going after. So, but I'm trusting that you will be looking at all of these things. Yes, Mike?
Is the city AAA rated as far
Yes.
as credit rating?
Good. Okay, so, but very interesting. You wanna talk about the capacity?
I don't.
Which
But
brings
Anthony will.
actually brings us to this letter that's in the middle of your table there that Peter brought to my attention, and we distributed to all the members having to do with.
No.
This is capacity for November 22. What was the question, Peter? I didn't follow. You said it was recommended this,
No, I just asked for it to be circulated for a variety of information. And it obviously struck me when it shows in this letter, I think it's in the letter anyway, how close the flow and the committed development is to the nominal capacity.
I thought your email said something about that it was recommended for disapproval.
Well, it was, wasn't it not?
I
It was
I didn't
subject
see it,
to
Not in
no.
the
things.
letter, no.
No, it's not a
The letter,
disapproval.
no, it just says that there's improvements required.
Oh, I'd have to go back to the accompanying commission item to
Can we,
find that, but
can we back up for the benefit of Anthony?
Yes.
What started this discussion? Let me just make sure we're done with our agenda. We just finished new, we did the bypass, Public Works update. The good news, and we'll get to you when we get to that. So I just wanna get through with the agenda. Public Works update. Water and sewer break reporting and mapping. Again, this is the latest of the water breaks. Not bad. No sewer breaks. We're doing good. Keeping an eye open, all right? CIP financial, that's the spreadsheets, which nobody can read and understand if you could read them. So unless anybody has some questions, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're on to general discussion and comments. We're gonna bring up James's issue, but first we're gonna do Peter's issue because I think that relates to what Anthony may be talking about. So, we had talked last month about a proposed new way of allocating capacity, changing it to, instead of when you get your DRC, not assigning it until you get your building permit, or some new creative way of assigning the capacity so that we don't bump up to the limit. And for the benefit of the new members here, we actually were asked by the mayor and the commission to opine on whether or not there should be a moratorium. And we spent many hours with all the people involved. We came to the conclusion that not at this time. And that was about a year ago. Because at that time, about a year ago, there was an ordinance in place and there was a process in place and we were all kind of comfortable with it and we knew eventually we were gonna hit it, but we were comfortable at that time that a moratorium was not necessary. It probably would not be justified at that time. But now we're getting closer. We're getting closer to the end here. And we're talking about a new way of increasing the permitted capacity of the sewage treatment plant with, taking one standard versus another standard, but we're not changing the capacity. The plant isn't physically changing. We're talking about administrative ways of raising that capacity limit so that we can in fact keep developing. All right? Whatever you may think of development, that's another issue, but that was the concern. So that, we wanted to, now that you're here, what a golden opportunity, let's talk about those things. Because when you look at this new letter, this new very fancy letter that comes with the development review, they are taking these things a lot more seriously than they used to do. I mean, it used to be a letter just said, yeah, we got capacity and that's it. Now we're getting an analysis, we're getting a capacity review, we're getting a pump station review. And in fact, the way I read this letter, Peter, it said that you can't build this project until the new pump station comes online. That's the way I read it.
You can't see it. You can build it, you just can't see it.
Yeah, so when you got a situation, now the guy went ahead and he built the damn project. It's sitting there, he's got them rented, waiting for a C of O, and this project isn't finished. What do you think? What do you think is gonna happen?
Well, it's his responsibility to do the upgrades.
Well, it
According
wasn't
to the
just the upgrades, it's the pump station, the way I read it.
But that's not him, based on the way I read it.
Yeah, but if we don't fix that pump station in time, I
I
don't
wonder
wanna jump
this,
to
this
conclusions.
is,
Let me not jump to conclusions here.
I mean, this one has,
He has to have
so
that pump station.
Anthony may know, this one has actually been to the commission.
This one
It's the
has,
Ben-
it's-
it's the
On
Benjamin.
the developer.
Did that get approved? Can
I
you
believe it
remember?
did.
But subject to these, like the chair said,
Yeah,
these
it would have
pump
been,
station
it would have been a
upgrades.
condition of approval for the project. So anytime there is an improvement needed to address any of the capacity issues for any project that goes before planning and zoning or city commission, it always ends up in conditions of approval.
So the verbiage in here about improving the pump station run times, et cetera, all of that is in the condition to approval
I
of the
believe the way
development.
it's written is the letter is referenced in
Yeah.
the conditions. Yeah, so there's conditions written in the letter, and then that letter is referenced.
But in terms of the nominal capacity of the sewage treatment plant, that is not referenced because you've still got that tiny little nominal amount of capacity left, a very small line in the little graph there that you can hardly see. But it is that nominal capacity that the city or the staff is trying to amend. Is that a correct summary?
So, sort of, yes. So we're looking at a couple different things. One is the ability to change when we grant the actual capacity. When you actually allocate that number and it goes into the pot and it says that it's allocated and it's ready to be removed from what's available. So you're right, we were looking at the ability to do that at DRC versus at the entitlement stage when the Planning and Zoning Board of City Commission looks at these. So the city attorney's office working on that. The other is the injection wells. So looking at cleaning the injection wells on a more regular basis to make sure that the flows into the wells are at their optimal conditions so that we can continually push the water that we need into it. Because the injection wells are actually the limiting factor. I'm glad that Chris and Alan are here. So stop me if I say anything wrong, because they're the engineers, and Omar. But the injection wells are the limiting factor because we have over 93 million gallons per day capacity at the plant itself. The injection wells can't accept that kind of flow. So right now, I don't know what the schedule was, but I think it was kind of sporadic. It was when we cleaned them and we wanted to.
I think it was every 5 years.
Every 5 years, so we want to go to every 2
Permit, it's every 5 years, and we are trying to go to a 2-year schedule, which will keep them at optimal operating capacity for the majority of that 2-year period.
And then we also engaged this firm, CDM, I think is who they're called. And so they are doing 2 things for us. They are talking to the county about what we can do in terms of the possibility of raising that actual limit that you see on the county's methodology. And then the other is looking at other enhancements to the water treatment plant itself that would address some of these things. And then we also know that I&I is a huge issue. So we're continuing with our CIP projects, I think 114 million over the next 5 or 7 years to address I&I because we're really not seeing the needle move very much on that. So that's a big impact, and not only from us, but from our customers as well, Wilton
Right.
Manors and Oak Park.
Right. So, okay. One of the concerns I had was that the current methodology and the current spreadsheet, you guys remember that big old spreadsheet? Every project was listed, okay, and they got their allocation. And I recall, it was my understanding that if you don't get your project in the ground within 2 years, that authorization or that allocation went away and you had to do it again.
So the letters are written that way, but state statute doesn't support that. You have an entitlement. It is what it is. And so it's kind of like the trips on the beach. They don't go back into the pool unless the project is terminated or it is expired. So we've had the same issue with this as we had with units and trips and all this other stuff, which is the state has done emergency declarations and automatically extended these things. We write it that way, and the applicants have been pretty compliant with how we've written it, that you need to reassess it. But I don't think we could ever hold that up in court if we got challenged.
So once you give them a capacity letter, they got the capacity. Let's
At
just.
entitlement, so that was a distinction that we had to make at the commission meeting, because the way staff was doing it was during the DRC. So if you had something that was site plan level 4, had to go all the way to city commission. What staff was doing was taking that letter that they were drafting at the DRC and then pulling that allocation out of the pool of availability. What they really need to do, and what we fixed since then, is it really wasn't clear until we started digging into this and looking at all the variables and how things were moving through the process, that we told staff you cannot do it at that point, you do it at allocation. So the night the city commission approves it, then it's officially off the books. Up until that point, it's a race between whomever is trying to get that last bit, just like our units.
Yeah, the units, they're racing for the last of the
Yeah.
units, yes, okay. So that's a major change that, I'm glad you're making us aware of that.
It helped, it gave us some additional capacity, I think like 500,000 gallons per day or something, but we've eaten that up. So back when I did the presentation in January, I said there's roughly 1 million gallons per day left. We got some back, but we're back to about, I think it's, the official number is 1.164 million gallons per day.
Okay, so, yes, Peter.
So, Anthony, so how, going forward a while in time, and staff is still writing the same sort of letters that we have here. So this last page with summary wastewater treatment capacity, and you have the various blocks, the biggest one being the current demand. But how would you envision this working when you've used up that little tiny capacity remaining line at the very top?
Unless we have additional capacity to allocate, you effectively have stopped development in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, well, that will be a great headline.
Unless staff agree something administratively, that's a question, with the county whereby they agree that we can increase.
Correct,
48.5
that's assuming that
million.
everything I said hasn't happened yet. So the county hasn't agreed to change the methodology or increase the permit capacity. We haven't really been able to move the needle on I&I. We don't do the injection wells. If anything stays status quo today, and that line was where it is razor thin, and we get another handful of developments that chew up that last 1 million gallons.
It's done.
We are done. And we were at the point, or we thought we were at the point before we reassessed the numbers that we were gonna be done. But if you recall, when I was explaining this at the city commission, the way the county does it, because of the way they do the average, it goes up and down. So you get these storm events, and you know, the I&I just starts to inflow into the system, and it increases that number, but then it goes back down when everything dries up for 3 months. So the number, we got a little bit back, but now we're starting to see the needle go back in the wrong direction.
Wait until the rainy season.
Exactly. And then the county will wanna know, you know, their biggest question, I think when the consultant went to talk to them, I believe some members of Alan's staff went as well, and some people from DSD, was, okay, we're not opposed to this idea, but what are you gonna do about these, you know, the water being treated, but yet still going to the outfalls because you're not able to get into the
So that's their
injection wells.
primary concern, is the overflow.
I think it's one of their biggest concerns, yeah.
No, really, seriously. Okay, so this is good. This could be potentially very controversial, because there will be a lot of people who will say, let's stop, and not be at all unhappy about the concept that, you know, we reached the limit, let's stop. So it's gonna be very controversial, okay? So let's think about this. The only way you can actually get some more capacity is to rely on the I&I, okay, helping us, to somehow make Oakland Park, you know, do I&I as well. To clean the filters. I'm talking about physically making the thing, physically clean the filters. I mean, if you physically clean the filters, then the county, then your permit doesn't change.
It doesn't
Physically
change the
cleaning
permit, it
doesn't change
changes
the
the
permit.
ability to discharge the water into the injection well versus into the water.
Which is good, but it doesn't change the development issue, does not address
It
the.
wouldn't have any effect on these letters. Right.
But also remember, the only time that we have problems with the injection wells
Is the
is
overflow.
those heavy rain events where we have peak flows going in 80 to 90 MGD. Normal flows are down around in the low 40s on an average day. So if we can get it so that we can manage more during those peak periods, that's what the county's really looking for.
So that you thinking that they will increase your permit if you can show them that you have made improvements in the outflow issue?
Yes, to manage those extreme peak events.
Cause the plant has a ton of capacity left over. The plant's not really the issue, right? So if you can convince the county that we can deal with the water and we don't have to, you know, push it into the outfall, then I think there's a strong argument for increasing the permit.
Okay. Yes, Ralph?
I was gonna say, at some time, there was talk about a 6th deep injection well. That to pick up, increase design, flows from future design.
So
That is one
maybe
of the
that's not
things. that we have the consultant looking at is what options are there for physical increasing capacity. In the well fields, it would be 6 injection well, but that's a lot more complicated than just putting another hole in the ground because it would have to meet today's standards in construction, which is extra pre-treatment and a lot of other requirements, as well as there's a lot of space constraints in that area.
If you clean up those filters, how much more can you pump down there?
When you get close to the 5-year cleaning cycle, they're running capacity about 80, maybe even a little bit less than 80 MGD through the wells. When they're cleaned, the very first day after they're done being cleaned, they're running in the 90 to 93 MGD. So you lose about 10 MGD, give or take, over 5 years.
It's actually cleaning the wells. It's cleaning the wells, yeah.
So if you're
that's
doing
not a
it
lot,
every 2
10%.
years, we stay up in the 90s somewhere then.
Yeah,
Yep.
you would stay at a higher level.
And how much more would they give us if we can tell them that we can stay up at 90? We don't know.
We don't know yet, and that's the point of hiring the consultant, to have those conversations and see where we get with it.
Peter?
Can you give us some more colour on the county's concern about the sporadic use of the outfall to the intracoastal? What kind of things were they saying that concerned them about that?
So when we were meeting with them in our initial meeting, the fact that they brought it up at all was the telling sign that that was one of their biggest concerns about our capacity at all, period. As far as the discussion, what kind of things were coming up as we were talking, it's really more a matter of, which if you'll recall when I presented this information to you guys last time, I used the word, we're lucky to have this outfall, and somebody disagreed with the luck, but this outfall is something that we have because of our old grandfather permit conditions. As you may know, Dade County, for instance, is actually being required to remove all of their outfalls from any systems that they have down there. So it's actually something that we shouldn't have, or we wouldn't be able to have if we were to build a plant or major improvements to our plant today. So the county's very focused on, if you have capacity and you're asking us to give you more capacity because you can handle it, then why is it last year you had to use the outfall 5 times? Now granted, those 5 events, one time was an FPL primary power cut. It was very short, very little spilled, but nonetheless it went out. Another time was during a storm where we had extreme rainfall for like 3 days straight. And then the other 3 events were also rain related, not hurricane rain related. But one of those 3 events, we had one of the wells down for maintenance and cleaning, so we had actually one less well. So we were able to explain away why on 3 out of the 5 reasons. But again, they keep going back to the question of, why are you having to use that outfall at all if your plant has more capacity? And that's really what their hang up is. If we can stop using that outfall, they really don't care about our I&I problem, because for them, they just want the plant to be going down the injection wells like it's supposed to.
So they're really thinking when they say plant, they don't mean just the plant, they mean the whole system. Okay, why is the whole system not working? And, okay, so I understand that.
Yeah,
We're
they,
focused on the one aspect of the system, right? So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah, but
Because they're-
when they're thinking when they say to you that your plant is not operating well because you're having these things, what they're really saying is, it's not that the plant is the problem, it's the wells that are the problem.
and also the collection system upstream that's bringing everything, including rainwater down.
Rainwater.
And yet, remember, the reason why they focus on the plant is because that's what their permit purview is. Their permit purview has nothing to do with the collection and distribution systems, it's purely the plant. So that's why they can only focus on what's going there.
Michael?
Chris, is it, it's treated sewage that comes through the outfalls, right?
Yes.
So basically, will not have the fecal coliform levels, but would have the nitrogen and phosphorus still there, right?
So you'll have, and I mentioned this before, it's still boater friendly, but you're not gonna wanna be swimming in it and drinking it, that's for sure.
Certainly not environmentally friendly, that's for sure, yeah.
it's not ideal.
Yeah, Peter, one more?
And just to remind people, it would be ironic if we get to the situation that Anthony outlined and this little sliver of spare capacity has gone, because we have the cities that we service that aren't within this system, so they're still approving stuff regardless. So-
We are, and you bring up a good point, because we are not part of their approval path, and our agreements with them do not require them to be part of our approval path. However, Wilton Manors asked for a comprehensive plan amendment so that they could up the capacity of their water treatment. We originally told them the answer would probably be yes, but that was a while ago. And then when we got to the stage where we were doing this analysis, we're seeing we're close to an event, we told them no. And so the city manager and I had a meeting with their city manager, and she said that she was going to be sending us information on what they're doing to help with I&I for What Manners. We intend on reaching out to our other clients and seeing what they're doing and strongly encouraging them. But since we did just re-sign that agreement,
Yes, we
which
did.
was
I remember
like last
that
year,
discussion.
year before.
Just wanted to say last year.
Yeah, so we're kind of, it's not great. But the thing of it is, they really, if they don't do something, it's going to impact them as well. Because at some point, you want redevelopment to occur. They're still issuing, entitlements to these projects. You see with What Manners, and it was a small change. It was not big at all, and that was one of the arguments they were trying to levy against us. Like, it doesn't matter.
It's cumulative.
It's cumulative.
And it is a topic of discussion at the large wastewater users group where they get together all the communities and talk about wastewater issues.
So, the commission, I think, was pretty much aware of this ancillary problem to our problem, because they're gonna have to solve this problem. And the other question I have for you is, we're talking now about the county permit. Wasn't there also an issue with the state permit?
No, the state, go ahead.
Yeah,
You know
sorry.
it better than I do.
So the county and the state permit, frankly, they go hand in hand. The county's permit, as I may have mentioned, is basically just a reduction in terms of how things are calculated from the actual state DEP permit. So when we have 56.6 MGD with the state, and that's based on a 3-month rolling average of flows, the county does a 1-year rolling 12-month window of average flows and applies basically a factor of safety to it. The peaking factor is what it's called, which is why we have a smaller number with the county than what we have with the state. It just accounts for the larger variabilities in the way that the calculations are
So
done.
the county's the controlling one.
They're the
Kansas is
controlling
the
one on
lowest
us.
And they're the ones we're bumping up against. If you look at the state numbers compared to what we have left, it's much bigger.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
What's the logic of this county looking at this differently than the state?
Because the state has to have a standard that applies to the entire state. South Florida has different weather conditions and environmental conditions, so they have redone it to apply more specifically to the conditions in Broward County.
Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, we're not all similar or same.
The Panhandle is very different than here when it comes.
Right, but I think of regional.
They also have a factor of, the county wants to ensure that all of their sub-agencies are well within the actual permits. So they're essentially applying, sorry for using the word again, they're essentially applying a higher level of safety factor
Okay.
to make
That's
sure
good.
none of us go over the state's numbers.
That's good. All right, so what's the timing on this?
Well, CDM's currently working on both projects, the assessment of the plant and the permit. I think there's gonna be some fundamental questions to answer for the county before we can go back to them and say, here's what we're, trying to do to address your concerns. I don't know what the length of the contract's for.
The one where they're assessing what's going on at GTL is about 3 months from NTP, so we've got about another 1 to 2 months before we get the report on that. And the one where they're working on the engineering memorandum for us for the county that's really not a deadline per se, but we should have something in the next few weeks, month at the most, that we can actually review and then decide whether or not we're sending it to the county.
So let me ask you a question though, or another question, yet another question. And it just went right out of my head. Damn. Okay, so about 3 or 4 months, we should have an answer to this question. And then, is there anything that needs to be done? I know what is there anything that needs to be done? How much is this gonna cost us? If one of the things we have to do is clean those wells more aggressively, how much is that gonna cost and where is that coming from? I mean, obviously, it's gotta be a SIP project. I can't see anyplace else.
It's operational.
Arguably, they should be doing that anyway, so.
You know how much it is? I don't remember.
I remember the contract.
I don't think it's that much, but I can't remember.
I think one well is it's under $1 million
To clean?
for the yeah.
Oh, so that would
So
cover.
it's within the operational budget, it's not CIP if I
Right.
remember right.
Okay,
We can find out what the number is.
Okay, it's not all the money in the world, that's important. Yes, okay.
Yeah, so I'd
Any
like to
other
be
questions?
I'd just like to be
Kept
kept in the
informed,
loop
yeah.
on this, so.
Yeah, when you get those reports, it would be good to have a little, discussion to keep us in the loop.
It's not only cleaning the wells, but they look at the structure of the well, if there are any cracks, if there's anything that needs to be repairable.
Right, okay. All right, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
We gotta get to our next meeting.
Yeah. Run. All right, so now, the one thing that Peter, that James wanted to bring up is James, you wanna talk about it again? How do we handle the requests
Right,
from communities?
I would just like us to come to an agreement on, procedural really agreement on how we would handle future letters that are emailed to the committee, asking for some kind of assistance, serving as a go-between or whatever they might be. The chairman indicated that she didn't think any individual should respond.
Mhm.
But I think we do owe people a response. If a civic association does say something, we owe them a response. So I would like to see us come to a decision on how we would respond and if this should happen again in the future. So,
What would you suggest?
well, I would suggest that nobody individually responds until the group is allowed to meet,
Okay.
and that we come to a discussion and say how we wanna respond, and that the chairperson drafts a response, and that becomes the response that goes back in.
Okay,
That's what I would suggest.
yes,
I think it's a great idea, except that if it's an emergency on my part, and we met yesterday, I don't wanna have to wait 30 days before the committee meet again, and then another week to get an answer to them. I don't think that's fair to the people that we are supposed to serve and protect, when it comes to these issues. I believe that we can operate under the auspices that in the absence of the committee in meeting, we can authorize the chair or a chair designee, if you wanna be somebody else, to respond on the behalf of the committee. That's the way most of these things like this work. Because when people ask a question, they really want an answer. And that particular question, I remember, now could be all right, but something like that to have to wait 30 days, 40 days. But all the issues that will spring up in the communities around can't wait that amount of time. So we need a quicker and a reliable and agreed upon response that doesn't take that long.
Mike?
That was one thought I had as well. But then I think kind of back to what we are as an advisory board to the city and moreover to the commission. And I think that if somebody has an emergency that's so pressing, right? I think that city has an 800 number for that. They have staff. I mean, I think I would argue that we're not staff for the city. But I also agree with you. I'm the same way. I hate things to kind of, to be in limbo, while we draft a response. But at the same time, I think, I also don't want to set a precedent that we are the direct contact that folks go to when they're having issues with whatever they may be having their issue with. So, frankly, I'm totally on board with your idea.
Okay, so maybe okay.
Yeah, since I'm the culprit here.
No.
You're wonderful.
Like I said the last time, no good deed goes unpunished, but I could understand the individual in this neighborhood and not having seen the neighborhood nor the drainage structure or drainage problems. I did relate to the neighborhood that I'm a director in, that we had some difficulties with the actual drainage structure itself not being a drainage structure. And then secondly was the typical what happens in most communities over periods of years and years where the swales build up because folks keep putting in sod and the stormwater can't sheet flow off the road readily and get in there into an inverted system and then percolate, drain and percolate down. It pretty much keeps the streets flooded. So I was trying to really basically give them some general thoughts on that. And I guess I, subsequently realized that, yeah, I should have probably not identified myself as the civil engineer member of the Infrastructure Task Force Committee, Advisory Committee, just as another civic association trying to help another civic association out without giving definitive solutions. I think in my response, I did say something about the 8,000 number for them to call, report, and get some of these things looked at or whatever. But it was all in a good faith effort to try to help a community in their problem. And, I'm very reluctant in doing anything as an engineer or retired engineer. I would always insist on my people and say, you have to go out there, look at the site specifically, get definitive, solutions thought up before we just do that. And I think I was saying that pretty much and just referring to Imperial Point's storm drainage situation and that what they needed to get to with the city to work out whatever needs there are.
Okay, so maybe we could do a little bit of both. Maybe we should add to our agenda letters to the committee, okay? If during the course of between meetings, we get a letter, it will be on the agenda for the next meeting. But in the interim, when a letter comes to the committee, it doesn't come to my house, it comes to the city, and they send it to me for information. I think that the most that I can do at that point to be responsive is to say, thank you for the letter, okay? We will be discussing it at the next meeting, okay? And in the meantime, if this is an emergency, call
That'll work.
somebody, okay? So maybe we could draft up a sort of a form, and we let that go, and then we'll discuss it, and maybe we'll take more action, maybe we'll just stand on that. How's that sound?
I think that's good.
I like
That's
that
what
too.
we'll do. Okay,
And Ralph, to your point, I mean, if I go to a neighborhood civic association, they know I'm the infrastructure person. They'll ask me all kinds of questions. I'll answer as best as I can, but most of the time I refer them to the city for the details and stuff. I don't try to be the expert.
Well, you can't really, if you're not physically looking at the problem itself. I mean, that's where I was, and so I ultimately referred them to the 8,000 number or whatever, and then from there they could be channeled to.
Can I- thank you guys. Can I just go back to this letter for a minute? Because this letter was issued as part of a development review, okay? This is Peter's letter, the letter that Peter brought to our attention. I know. But tell me if I'm wrong, but it says to me, based on the projected sewer flows, the pump run times would increase approximately XXX. Other committed flows are there, ta-da. It will be over capacity, therefore improvements to the pump station will need to be made in order to reduce the run times and meet the new demand. So they're calling out that the pump station needs to be improved.
That was made a condition of the
Yes.
approval.
Yeah, but he's not fixing the pump station.
He will be.
Will be.
He is gonna have to improve the entire pump station?
Upsize the pumps.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
There's sometimes if we have a CIP project for X pump station, we'll get it done and then the development can take place. But sometimes if they wanna do the development before we fix, then they have to.
So if he got lucky and we fixed the pump station prior to, but if not, he's got a certificate of occupancy looming, he's gotta do it.
Correct.
Hey, we're making progress.
I would love to piggyback off that.
Yes, certainly.
So, pretty much every letter that comes out now, unless you get lucky, has requirements.
Mhm.
The city is not always looking at all the requirements in that basin to see if they align during the review.
Okay.
Now, the state statute allows technically all of your water and sewer capital expansion fees to be used towards these improvements. If those projects are not coordinated, you could have a project that goes in line before, upsizes an 8-inch main to a 10-inch main, uses all the money that could go to the city, the expansion fees, and then the project immediately following could kick that up to the next size and be required to upsize what was an 8 at the time of analysis to a 12. So they're ripping out that brand new 10-inch line and putting in a 12-inch line because it wasn't coordinated.
Wasn't in the past.
Wasn't, is it now,
Yes.
always?
To the extent that we can, when you have 7 developments sitting on your books
Right. When you know about it,
that you know are coming,
yes.
but are they coming all at the same time, or are they coming spread out over the next 20 years? So you have to basically, what we're doing is now, is that we're looking at what we know is coming. For sure, I guess you could say, that's gone through DRC. And what we think is coming, pretty sure because we know who the developers are and the likelihood of the project. So we look at all that holistically in that basin. And we say, if all these come on board, this one here is gonna cause this upsize from an 8 to a 10.
Yep.
But this one here, plus this one here, actually makes it need to be a 12. We will actually say first come, first serve.
Right.
Whichever developer's coming in here, you're gonna be hit with a 12-inch pipe no matter what.
That's not what I've been led to understand.
Okay.
That first project is only required to upsize
To 10.
to what's required for their project.
That's historically how it has been done, yes, but it's much more holistic now than it was in the past.
I
Can
heard
we
as
sustain
last
that?
week, there was a meeting with legal and they
Well,
squashed that.
Legal doesn't know what we're doing to make our utilities actually operate.
That's all I wanna hear. Because what I heard, particularly in a project that's requiring pump upsizing.
Yep.
Is that they were told at the table that they only have to upsize the pumps to
To meet their
meet
development.
their demand.
Mhm.
And there's another project coming in that's gonna require it to kick up even more.
Sorry, go ahead.
Would
Okay,
that be a
the
second?
first project only has enough capital expansion fees to pay for their small pump upsize, not the upsize for the holistic.
Right.
There's, how are you going to burden that first user with the additional cost of the whole pump upsize?
So this is something that we would have to have an if-then scenario that we could workshop for hours, to be quite honest, because there's too many different scenarios that could play into this. But the general idea that you're given here, first of all, back to what you're saying, there have been a few instances where the legal folks might get involved and they may agree that we cannot demand certain things. But with that being said, there is actually nothing in the law, whether it be city code or state law, that prevents us from saying whichever development comes in here, if we know all this other stuff is required, we can request the proper improvements to be done to the city's infrastructure in order to handle whatever we know is coming. And in the end, whether your development fees or your impact fees or whatever are higher or lower than the cost of that infrastructure, yes, you will get refunded all the way up to the maximum of what you put in for your development fees. And then whatever else it costs beyond that is on you, because you're getting beneficial use of actually being able to do your development first and be able to have this system operate so you can get a CO before anybody else.
Sure. You used to work in Miami, right?
Yes,
Does
and here
Miami
too.
have- I remember when you were here. Miami, don't they have a cost sharing where you can get refunded for any other projects in that basin that do an up?
I'm not sure to that level of granularity, but I can tell you that following the state law where the refunds are given, which is only just recently have people actually been
Right.
demanding that. The code in the city of Miami was that we could request up to 10% of your construction costs of your development for anything that we deem necessary for our entire city. It doesn't have to be on the street next to your building, it could be anywhere in the city. And then, so what we were doing there was, I'll give you an example of one that was successful, is we worked with one of the developers who's gonna be redoing 6 blocks. That area is in the Edgewood area. It floods intensely all the time whenever somebody spits on the ground. So we asked them to do a pump station on a corner of their property, so there's somewhere to put a pump station. We asked them to do the pump station, reroute all the stormwater infrastructure for 3 parallel streets, as well as the avenue connecting the 3 streets. At first, they thought it was excessive until they realized
They gotta get it to their house.
they won't be able to open up the 800 to 1,000 units that they're gonna be selling for hundreds, if not $1 million a piece. So they, in the end, decided, okay. And so they're gonna get a refund of their impact fees and the other couple of $1 million beyond that cost them. It's the cost of doing business, because they're gonna be able to sell those buildings faster.
Sure, and I don't disagree that this is a very atypical situation, but you have developer A who's in, got their letter first. They have the requirement to upgrade to their capacity. Developer B came in, same basin, I think it's A11. Yeah. They are also required, but whoever gets there first, so developer A is probably gonna get there first. By his letter, he only has to upgrade to his
So
capacity.
the difficulty here is, as I mentioned, what's been done in the past and what's been done more thoroughly now, of course, we're improving every day, right? So this type of scenario that you're building out here is something that we've only gotten better and stronger at dealing with. But with that being said, also with the way that we're rewriting the letters now, that you don't really have anything guaranteed in terms of what you're gonna have to do for improvements until it comes time to actually apply for permits. So that gives us one last chance to take a look to see at what we know is happening in the area closer to when you're actually getting ready to do your project. And we do have the ability to request that, let's say the pump has to be even bigger now, or the pump plus a pipe upsize. Yeah.
Wait, you just said something that, I'm sorry, you got more? You wanna
No,
continue
that's it,
that?
I just think there needs to be some method of shared
I-
cost.
I just think, you said something that just clicked off in my mind. The impact fees are going into a pot of money, and we're keeping track of where it came from and what project it's gonna be used for.
So generally speaking, the money is coming into a pot, and it is tracked as far as what basin that money is related to the development that's impacting.
Okay,
But remember, the impact fees aren't meant to just build a pump station for your basin. It also, when you're impacting our utilities, you're impacting the entire distribution system all the way to the plant.
Correct.
Plant operations, the chemical costs, and so on and so forth. So that money, this may not be what you're asking, but that money can be used anywhere in the city because the operation of our system is what you're impacting.
well, that's my understanding, but now we're looking, maybe I misunderstood. If you're required to do that pump station, okay, they get refunded their impact fees?
So per the state law, yes, you
Which
get,
state law? What state law are we talking
I
about?
don't know the number anymore, I used to.
Something new?
About 2
Within
years?
2 years, yeah.
Maybe 3?
So now the state says that you have to give them back the impact fees?
Yeah, because essentially they've improved the system that they're impacting. They may not be giving us a new well at GTL, but they are giving us money in terms of actually infrastructure in the ground that we would have had to upgrade anyways for that.
For their development, for their
development to be there.
nexus, their additional impact.
Mhm.
But they're also paying for everybody else's additional impact. Find
To
that
an
very
extent, yes.
fascinating.
To an extent. To an
Yeah.
extent.
I don't say it's wrong, I'm just saying that, this was never I should know this, but it was never my understanding that they get that money reimbursed.
Just recently.
Is it comparable
nobody-
to the expense that they would put into, say, upgrading the pump? Is the impact fee that's given back
I
to
don't know, it
them?
might be more, might be less.
Oftentimes, yeah, I would say it's comparable. I'd say oftentimes actually the impact fees might even be a little bit more than what we would have traditionally asked them to do, but we're actually, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but we're actually being more aggressive as far as what we're requiring, back to our conversation earlier, in that recognizing as we get better at what we do and how we do it, we recognize that we shouldn't just be asking you to give me a 6-inch pipe, only to turn around 2 years later and ask you to give me a 10-inch pipe. We really need to look at this with a broader window.
Boy, I can see the lawsuits.
Well, again,
I hope not, but I can see lawsuits pouring in on that one.
again, technically speaking, we have 2 things that cover us from being sued. One is we can ask for whatever we want, doesn't mean you have to give it to me, all right? And number two, is the impact fees refund. What's it costing, or what is it costing you is the impact fees, or more, but
And you
in
get
the
to
end-
use the impact fees on your project,
you're right.
as opposed to throwing, well, it makes sense.
And
Makes
if you
sense.
want that property to be built and we've determined that we need more capacity for you and your neighbor,
It's a win, it's a win,
It's
it's
a
a
win
win,
because
okay.
it's done a lot more cost effectively than the city.
and there is,
Sure.
obviously, I think maybe to Shane's point earlier, there is some room for the attorneys to get involved in these negotiations, and that we're demanding this extra pipe sizing and this extra large pump because of you plus your neighbors. But in the end, they can always probably find a way to force us to back down to, okay, what is it only gonna be required for our development? And then we can go back to, okay, this is what it only requires for your development. However, your street's gonna be ripped up, your sidewalk's gonna be ripped up, your pavers, your access to your property, and so on and so on and so forth. Think about how long it took you to do this development on this road. Your neighbor's getting ready to do the same thing, and they're gonna cause all this pain to you and your property owners and
Can they
renters.
get a portion of
That's a
the
good
second
incentive.
guy's impact fees to help
That's a good
cover the cost?
That would be something that we're actually discussing with the attorneys either this week or next, but more specifically, yes and no. In other words, the developers, when we tell them who's impacting whom, because we know that A11 or wherever, that there's at least 3 or 4 coming.
Yeah.
And they're all gonna hurt each other in terms of causing repetitive upgrades to the same thing. We can give them that information as to what else is coming and why is it I'm asking you for a 12-inch instead of 6. And then they can actually go and enact their own developers agreements between each other to where they can agree on first come, first serve, I pay, you give me a portion, whatever million scenarios you want.
Okay, that's cool.
Yes,
That's cool.
but you can't use the capital expansion fees towards that.
Right.
And that's the,
Right.
and I would hate where it comes to legal and they say you only have to do what's enough to maintain your capacity. And then the next guy rips it out and they both get reimbursed, and that's money that could have been spent on I&I or elsewhere throughout.
Right,
That's where the
right.
loss is.
And you did mention something that I think it caught my ear. From now on, we're not giving them a capacity letter until they finish the approval process, okay? That's the new normal now. So it doesn't go on that spreadsheet at DRC, it only goes on that, so have you now recalculated that spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's
But
still.
some of them have not been approved,
Right, it's still the same information, but with extra columns on it now.
okay,
So
alright.
just
Go
to
ahead.
clarify that, you're still giving the letters when they're requested, but they don't go into this committed demand line item until
Right.
approval.
There's a difference between capacity analysis
You're
and,
gonna get this
So,
letter.
right, so the capacity analysis is
But
just
you're
how
not
many
locked
gallons
in.
go to the
Yep.
sewage treatment
and
plant
we tell you that we have capacity, but we're not actually going to allocate it and lock it for you
until you
yet.
go for
Right,
the
you're still
permit.
getting this, you find out what you would have to do to the
get a permit.
improvements.
To get a permit?
To get a permit, yes.
To get a permit.
And
He's
CO.
gotta acknowledge this to get a permit.
And CO, it's those conditions of approval on DRC then move into the engineering conditions at building permit.
And building permit.
Yep.
So he knows when he gets his permit, what he has to do, and he's gotta do it by the time he gets his certificate of
They
occupancy.
typically have to submit all the off-site improvements as a separate permit, at least start it or TBD it, before they can even get their master.
Excellent, okay, we're at
So the
four
city's doing good.
21, anything else, Ralph?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, maybe I don't know if it's a collective thing or not in your permits and everything, but just as the example, if you've got 4 people that are looking for, let's say a 6-inch capacity, and then once you get them on, instead of putting in obviously 4 6 inches, you put in a 12-inch, which gives you the same capacity as 4 6s, which would be a lot less expensive because it's one pit, one,
One excavation, one pipe, one time.
Exactly. So that may, there's some way to get that worded in such a manner to keep the city in a point of not losing money, but maybe saving money, would be a way to put it.
And that's all part of the narrative too, when we speak to these developers, reps, again, like impacting your neighbor's property when you go to start doing construction, that's one reason why you should consider doing this, as well as the right size pipe now is really, it's cheaper for everybody in the end.
Exactly.
Okay, and Peter has one more comment.
A quick comment, I think we've just had a pretty interesting insight into the DRC and what goes on at the DRC. And having seen this and listened to particularly Chris's responses, I'm very happy that the staff is indeed truly anticipating and addressing many of the demands and developments on the city's infrastructure. So, I'm very pleased to hear what Chris had to say.
And I think we can be very happy that from when we started to where we are today, amazing progress has been made. these letters were almost worthless at that, 6 years ago, yeah, you got capacity and that was it. But now we're getting down to not only the lines, but the pump stations, where we all know the issue is at the pump stations, so bravo.
And just to point out, I appreciate those comments, by the way, because A24, for instance, the pump station that's gonna be built at Peter Feldman Park, that one actually was used with projected growth projections also. So that pump station was designed based on modeling for what's there now, what we need to split off the other basins. But also we projected population growth using the county and also our own city's planning departments, growth projections for the area that pump station will be serving. So we're doing things like that you don't even see in the background as we're designing our own capital and infrastructure.
To answer your question before about the cost of cleaning the wells, it's about $3 million for 5 wells.
For 5 wells,
Yeah.
that's,
How much?
3 million.
I'll write you out a check, no worries.
Before you guys leave,
Yes.
our September meeting falls on a holiday, so we would have to reschedule.
Yeah, let's put that on the agenda for the next agenda and also the summer vacation.
Summer vacation.
Yeah, we
Discuss-
traditionally
to
take off
discuss.
July, so let's put those on the
Oh.
agenda for the next meeting, okay?
Please.
All right.
Chris, did you
Thank
say you have a meeting regarding possible sharing?
We will be meeting with the city attorney to discuss exactly what you and I were just discussing.
Is there any way to find out an update after that? Is that
Well, let's continue.
privileged information or?
No, really, let's continue this discussion
Yeah,
on the
this is
next
great.
meeting, because this
Great
whole
discussion.
issue of the permits and the, we gotta keep that discussion going.
Yeah, and whatever comes out of that meeting, I'll know what I can and can't share. So
Sure.
Good, all
Thank
right. We are adjourned, thank you, see you at the next meeting. Okay. That was a good meeting. Only infrastructure nerds like us enjoy this.
Anytime.
All right.